I recall one of my mentors, Jeff Stiefler. Jeff ended up running American Express, Harvard Business grad, Wharton School of Finance. He told me once, he said, one of the things he's noticed is that oftentimes many of us will strive to get into a groove. And oftentimes we all get into that groove, but if you're not careful, that groove can turn into a rut. And today, what I'm going to be reviewing with you is really the evolution of the sales process. And I want to stress that be careful when I go through these 7 generations of sales, as you're thinking about them and reflect back, that you're not caught in one of those ruts. Because it's only by continuing to evolve and ultimately get to the what we'll call the 7th generation here, the trustworthy advisor, that's when you're going to be able to take your practice to the next level. So be careful of the rut. Hello, and welcome to Valuability, a video and audio podcast for financial professionals, business owners, and anyone interested in financial planning, business, and just personal leadership development.
In this episode, we're going to be discussing the evolution of the sales process. Now, as Philip mentioned, there are 7 generations to the history of how sales have developed over time. Philip is going to cover each of those generations, give you an idea of where they sit within the historical time frame of human evolution, and describe each of those different sales evolutions. This is going to give you an idea of where you lie in the evolutionary process and give you an idea of how you can progress heading towards that final goal of being a trustworthy financial advisor. My name is Danforth Fleak. I'm joined each week by my longtime friend and mentor, Philip Simensen. Philip, very much looking forward to this episode.
Thank you, Dan. You can find all of our episodes, both video and audio versions, on the web at value-ability.com. And of course, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can subscribe to our channel and click the bell to be notified of new episodes. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please take a second and give us a quick like. It helps us out tremendously. We'd also love to hear from you, either by commenting on our YouTube videos, or you can find us and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at value_ability.
So, Philip, when you're talking about the evolution of the sales process, now are you actually talking about the sales lizard crawling up out of the primordial ocean and growing legs and starting to walk around on land?
Well, Dan, not quite like that, but pretty close. I'm going to go back there. I chuckled. You made me laugh because I did the 23andMe and it said I'm 90% more Neanderthal than most people. So the first few generations, I should be feeling very comfortable. But what constitutes a generation? And well, first and foremost, there must be either a sociological or a psychological shift. And the primary driver, what history has taught us in regard to what causes a shift, it's competition in the marketplace. So let's take the first generation. It's called the barter system. This is, if we go back in evolution, it could be Neanderthal days. You didn't even have to talk. It was what would be called, again, the barter system. I'll have one of those for one of these.
Sure.
Right? And then the next generation, well, humans, as we evolve and get a little bit smarter, said, you know what, we're going to start stockpiling. So people now had to travel. So to the stockpile or what became the storefront. And then, examples of that could have been coal, flint, salt, etc. So that was the second generation.
Now and there, you're talking about like the transition from prehistoric to historic times.
Yeah,
right?
to historical times, and people just the human just did start with the stockpiling, but then we just started evolving it more and more, and we got the storefronts and we got the retail business, etc. And
Right.
then from there, Dan, we went to that third generation, and then that's what we call the peddler. So now the peddler, there's no predetermined destination or ending. You just took your goods to the road, and you had to be careful sometimes with the peddlers. I always think of Robert Preston and Buddy Hackett and the Music Man. What's he sell? What's he sell? You wanted to get some of those peddlers. Like the Medicine Man, etc. You wanted to get them in and out of town within a weekend. Otherwise, you're going to be tarred and feather if you're really associated with those peddlers.
Right.
So
The snake oil salesman.
yeah, definitely that. Very slimy and greasy. But then the fourth generation. And this fourth generation, it's what we'll call a route or a route,
Depending on what part of the country you're from.
Exactly. I've lived down south, now up here in northern Minnesota, where the men are strong, but the women are stronger. Now this is this route or route. A classic of this one is of course as you think about it. I'm dating myself, 62 years around the sun, but it would have been the Avon or Fuller Brush salesperson, the milk person coming along, or if this still occurs some days, and the ice cream truck or lolly truck comes around, and you hear their song, and everyone runs out. It usually comes on a predetermined day and time during the week, and
Sure.
for some parts of the country, and the Schwann's person comes around still today.
Right. For those of you that don't know, Schwann's is originally an ice cream company, but now does lots of frozen food deliveries direct to your door still. So a little bit of a old time feel here in the upper Midwest.
Right. And from there then, Dan, now we went more to the fifth generation, which I'm going to call the scientific approach. Excuse me. This really can be associated with Dale Carnegie. And it probably, if we look back and dated it, it would have been 1939. Really kind of the end of the industrial era and moving more now, in the beginning, very infancy of the information era. But now, you're in this approach because it's all about a presentation or a script. And there's questions along the way, and you find the need and you kill it, and it's also right. It's all about product training.
Right.
So that's the fifth generation, and now the one generation that when I started sales back in '82, it's the information era was starting to occur. You had fax, the fax machines were starting to come, and it became, this in this particular information age, it borders on, we're going to call it the sixth generation, the consultative selling approach. And it borders on illusion because you're told that you need to be an assistant buyer. In reality, almost all of us learned, again, was just a presentation. And based upon how, along this presentation, these questions that you asked, you were able then to come up with a recommendation that would best fit your client's need through your probing techniques. But it was also, again, more importantly here, it was still more about the salesperson versus the actual prospect.
Right. So that is really interesting. This is the first time this has popped into my mind. But as you're transitioning there, right, 1980 to 85, personal computers are coming out. Cable television is coming out. More and more information. So in the past, you were the arbiter of financial information, right? And so the clients had to come to you. Now there are places where they could get that financial information. We hadn't gotten to, the Bloomberg TV and quite the saturation that we have today, but there was CNN and some of the cable news and financial news was starting to be more readily available, and so you really had to transition, but it was almost a kind of a fake transition.
Well, thank you. That is excellent, because and some of our listeners who are on, they're definitely going to remember. And I was glued to it. And my wife at my my bride at the time. Boy, Friday night we weren't going out till it's PBS and we had to watch the Eric Rukeyser report for the week, and then there was the nightly business report that came on at 10 o'clock every evening.
Right.
So where we're going here in this information here in the seventh generation, it's now you're transitioning, evolving to the trustworthy financial advisor or advisor. And at this point now, the client oftentimes, or prospect, has just as much information, if not more, than what the advisor has. Right. So in this process now, it's more important in this process that you as the advisor help the client determine, you help them determine a couple things. One, what are their 5 top values? What's truly important to them internally? Then connecting those values to what their goals are. And it's not so important that you really know and get a real deep understanding of those values and why they hold them, but it is important that you make the connection between how the values link to the goals. For instance, if family is one of their values, make sure it links to then risk management. In what if anything should happen to you and your number one asset, if it's the ability to work and create an income revenue stream, if you should become disabled or premature death, and by the way, I think almost all death is premature, but if that did happen to you, you wanted to make sure then that risk management, that insurance side was covered, and you make that linkage then behind family and taking care of the goal of a premature death, and helping those members or your prospects plan for that certainty of uncertainty. But your role then is being more of the coach and being that either that guide on the side or the sage on the stage.
Right. Now that you've used the very specific word of trustworthy as opposed to trusted advisor, what's the difference? It's a slight difference, but what is that difference?
No, I'm glad you asked that question. So let's take trusted. Now, a couple things here. Trusted, I would say Madoff was trusted. The guy who ran Enron was trusted. Martha Stewart, all trusted individuals. They were all, what I mean by that, these are bright people. They're all morally intelligent, but they weren't morally competent. And there's a difference between there of knowing and doing. They all knew what the right things were to do, but they just didn't do it. So they were trusted, but they took advantage of people's trust.
Right.
Now, by becoming trustworthy, that's when your behaviors and your words are in alignment. That's when you obviously tell the truth and you stand up for what's right. And ultimately, that's what I'm describing there is integrity. Those are the 3 traits of integrity. Now, we're all perfectly imperfect, but our role is becoming this trustworthy advisor, and it's only by learning and helping your prospects, clients, or members, if you're at credit unions, to become what their values are and linking those values to the goals. It's only by doing that process and assisting in that process that you'll be able to take your practice to the next level. Did I answer that question adequately for you, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the way that I think about it is that, being trusted is an external state. Right?
Yes.
It is something that people see you as, whereas being trustworthy is kind of an active state, internal to you, and it occurs when you are actually acting in the manner that a trusted person should be acting.
Right. But oftentimes we're human, and greed and other things and pride, takes
laziness.
Yeah, you take the shortcut and you take the easy way out, and that's what can happen. And people have asked me in well, what's the best way to market yourself? Well, it's very simple. Your best marketing technique is market your morals. And that's, and again, that is being ultimately then that's becoming trustworthy.
Right. That's a great thing to throw out to the listeners and viewers. Put a comment below about some examples of people that that are trusted versus some people that are trustworthy. And I'd love to hear some other examples. Philip had given you some, Madoff and Martha Stewart. And so what would be some public figures that are trustworthy, Philip?
Well, I'll tell you. There's one, and many of you might not know this gentleman, but boy, he's on the world speaking circuit, etc. And it's one of my mentors, and I learned a lot of this from him. And his name is Doug Lennox. And I'm just going to reach out and I'll put a plug to him, for you now. Go to Think to Perform. But Doug is one who's living in alignment each and every day.
Sure.
And I just, just was, truly blessed to have him in my life, because I wouldn't be where I am without what he was able to share with me. So,
awesome.
Yeah. In the financial industry, a lot of these people will have heard of him. He's spoken at a lot of national conferences of different broker dealers, etc. So,
right, still very active.
Yes, he is.
As writes articles and things like
written
that.
4 books, etc. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll put a link to Doug's website in the video. Give him a little shout out there. If you're interested in learning more about the services that Philip and I offer through our consulting firm, Fair Savoir Consulting, you can check us out on the web at fsconsultingltd.com. The Valuability homepage is located on that site, but you can also get to us at value-ability.com. If you have questions or topics that you'd like us to cover in an upcoming episode, please reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. You can comment on this video at YouTube or contact us through Twitter or Instagram at value_ability. And please, if you enjoyed this video, do us a huge favor and give it a quick like. It helps out a ton.
And I'll just finish off by saying, remember, people do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. And to me, what that means is touch the heart before the brain. One thing I would like to pass on to you here is before every interview that you have with your prospects, a great question to ask is, what 1 or 2 outcomes do you want from today's meeting? So at the end of this meeting, you can say, this has been time well spent, or this has been a successful meeting. If you know your stuff, this is all about relationship. You can back into anything from there.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Philip, and we'll look forward to talking to you all next week.